Emotional abuse isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with shouting or threats. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It hides in the way someone dismisses your feelings, twists your words, or makes you question your own memory. Over time, it doesn't just hurt, it erodes who you are. For INFJs, this kind of abuse can cut especially deep. The INFJ personality is built around empathy, insight, and emotional depth. They feel everything intensely. They care deeply. And they often sense other people's emotions, even before those people do. That's a beautiful trait, but it can also make them more vulnerable to emotional manipulation. They want to help. They want to understand. And they often believe they can fix what's broken, even when it's hurting them. In relationships, romantic, family, or even friendships, Alm says INFJs may stay too long. They may forgive too quickly. They may explain away toxic patterns just to keep peace. And while they're often seen as wise or emotionally strong, that strength can hide a painful truth. They're hurting more than they let on. This video isn't about labeling INFJs as victims. It's about showing how they survive, how they cope, and most importantly, how they heal. Emotional abuse can make you feel invisible, broken, or powerless. But that's not the end of the story. INFJs have a unique way of turning even the darkest pain into growth, clarity, and quiet strength. These 6 ways are not magic fixes. They're steps, tools, truths that INFJs can use to slowly find their way back to themselves. Whether you're in the middle of something painful or healing from something that already happened, you're not alone. And you're not powerless. This journey is yours, and you get to choose how it unfolds. Way number 1, recognize the patterns and validate the hurt. NFJs have a gift for seeing what others miss. They notice patterns in people's behavior, changes in energy, and subtle shifts in tone. But when they're the ones being emotionally abused, that same gift can turn against them. Instead of calling out the pattern, they question themselves. Instead of trusting their instincts, they start to believe maybe they're just being too sensitive. This is often the first hurdle in coping with emotional abuse, recognizing that it's happening. Not just in general, but to you. INFJs tend to give others the benefit of the doubt. They see the good in people, even when that good is buried under layers of control, manipulation, or neglect. That compassion is powerful, but it can also be dangerous when it keeps them in harm's way. The truth is, emotional abuse doesn't have to be obvious to be real. It can look like constant criticism hidden behind jokes. It can feel like never being enough, no matter how much you give. It can sound like someone saying, "You're imagining things," every time you try to explain how you feel. These moments may seem small, but over time, they create deep wounds. INFJs often carry those wounds quietly. They overthink. They replay conversations. They wonder if they misunderstood or if they somehow caused the pain themselves. But the turning point comes when they stop making excuses for the behavior and start naming it. Not as drama, not as weakness, but as truth. This is where the real shift begins. When the INFJ says, "That wasn't okay," even if no one else agrees. When they allow themselves to feel angry or sad or betrayed without guilt. When they stop defending the person who hurt them and start defending the part of themselves that was hurt. This kind of recognition is more than awareness. It's self-respect. It's choosing to believe your own experience, even when it goes against someone else's story. And for INFJs, that can be hard, because they've often been trained to doubt their voice in favor of keeping peace. But the truth is, peace that costs you your dignity isn't peace at all. And recognizing emotional abuse doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're finally listening to the part of you that's been whispering all along. This isn't love. This isn't okay. From that moment on, everything starts to change. because once you name it, you can start to face it. And once you face it, you can begin to heal. Way number 2, establish emotional boundaries and hold space. One of the hardest things for an INFJ to do, especially after emotional abuse, is to create real emotional boundaries. Not because they don't know what's right or wrong, but because they feel responsible for other people's emotions. They feel the tension in a room. They sense when someone is upset. And instead of pulling back, they lean in. They try to fix it. They absorb it. That's where things often go wrong. In emotionally abusive situations, INFJs tend to give and give, hoping that love, patience, or understanding will change things. But without boundaries, what they're really doing is allowing someone else's chaos to enter their inner world. And once it's inside, it takes over. The path forward begins with one clear truth: not every emotion you feel belongs to you. Some of it is projection. Some of it is manipulation. Some of it is a reflection of someone else's unhealed pain. INFJs are emotional sponges, but that doesn't mean they have to carry everything they absorb. Establishing boundaries isn't about being cold or distant. It's about knowing where you end and someone else begins. It means saying no, not just to actions, but to emotional burdens that aren't yours. It means recognizing when a conversation is turning toxic and walking away. It means allowing yourself to pause, reset, and return to your own emotional center before responding. This can feel unnatural at first. INFJs are used to being the emotional anchor for others. But after abuse, you don't owe anyone your energy, your space, or your emotional labor. Your healing matters more. Sometimes that means creating boundaries even with people you care about. It might mean less contact, shorter conversations, or more time alone. It might mean cutting ties completely. These choices are hard, but they are often necessary. At the same time, it's important to hold space for yourself, to listen to what your own emotions are trying to say, to check in with your needs before you rush to meet someone else's, to ask, what do I need right now, instead of, what will make them feel better? Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. And you get to decide who comes in and under what terms. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's self-respect. And for the INFJ, learning to hold that space is one of the most important steps in moving from survival to healing. Way number 3, seek safe outlets and trusted confidants. When INFJs go through emotional abuse, their first instinct is often to retreat. They pull inward. They go quiet. They stop reaching out. Not because they don't want connection, but because they don't trust it anymore. Abuse damages the trust. It makes you question who's safe, who's real, and whether it's even worth trying to explain what you're feeling. This isolation can become a trap. On the outside, the INFJ may seem like they're fine. They keep functioning. They smile. They nod. But on the inside, they're carrying a storm no one sees. And without a safe place to release that pain, it builds. It turns into anxiety, exhaustion, or emotional shutdown. The key here is finding a safe outlet. That might be a trusted friend who listens without judging. It might be a therapist who understands emotional trauma. It might be a notebook where thoughts can pour out uncensored. It might even be nature, walking alone, letting the trees hold what the world can't. INFJs don't need a big audience. They don't need attention or sympathy. What they need is a space where they can feel seen without being analyzed. A space where their words aren't picked apart or minimized. A space where their emotions are safe. For some, that space takes time to find. Past betrayal can make it hard to open up again. But it's worth the effort. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in connection, real, honest, non-judgmental connection. Sometimes that connection comes through art or music. Sometimes it's through voice messages to yourself or private letters that never get sent. Whatever the form, the goal is to express what's been trapped inside. The longer INFJs hold everything in, the heavier it becomes. But when they let it out, just a little at a time, something shifts. The pain loses some of its grip. The story starts to feel more manageable. And slowly, they begin to feel less alone. It's not about telling everyone what happened. It's about telling someone. Even if that someone is just a blank page. Even if that someone is your future self, looking back with pride that you finally decided to speak. Way number 4. Use inner reflection and self-compassion. INFJs are deep thinkers. After emotional abuse, they replay everything. They analyze every word, every reaction, every moment where they stayed quiet when they should have spoken up. This reflection can be helpful, but it can also turn into self-blame if it's not done with compassion. The INFJ mind is wired to search for meaning. After trauma, it becomes a double-edged sword. They want to understand what happened, but they also tend to take on the blame. Did I cause it? Was I too sensitive? Why didn't I leave sooner? These thoughts aren't just passing doubts. They can become mental loops that wear down self-worth. This is where self-compassion becomes critical. The INFJ needs to speak to themselves the way they would speak to someone they love. Not with judgment, not with pressure, but with gentleness, with patience, with care. Self-reflection should never turn into self-punishment. It should create clarity, not shame. Yes, it's important to look at what happened, but not to beat yourself up over it. The goal isn't to figure out what you did wrong. The goal is to understand what you need now. That might mean writing about your experience, not to relive it, but to make sense of it. It might mean sitting quietly and noticing how your body reacts to certain memories. It might mean meditating, breathing, crying, or simply resting. These small acts of reflection open doors inside you that may have been closed for a long time. And through it all, the tone of your inner voice matters more than anything. When you hear that voice saying, "You should have known better," respond with something kinder. Say, "You did the best you could with what you had, and you're still here." Healing is not a straight line. It moves in spirals. Some days you feel clear. Other days you feel stuck. But if your inner voice becomes your ally, not your critic, you can survive the darkest days without losing yourself. For INFJs, the inner world is where most of the healing happens. That space needs to feel safe. And that safety starts with how you talk to yourself. Way number 5. Reframe and reclaim their narrative. One of the most damaging effects of emotional abuse is what it does to your story. Over time, the INFJ may begin to see themselves only through the eyes of the person who hurt them. They start to believe they're too much, too sensitive, not enough, or hard to love. The narrative becomes warped, and they begin to shrink. But that story isn't the truth. It's a story written through pain, not clarity. And INFJs, as natural storytellers, have the power to rewrite it. Reframing the narrative doesn't mean pretending the abuse didn't happen. It means placing the events in context. It means saying, "Yes, that hurt, but that pain doesn't define me." It means shifting from a focus on what was done to you to what you've done since. This process takes time. It might start with something simple, like changing the way you describe yourself. Instead of saying, "I stayed too long," you say, "I learned what love isn't." Instead of saying, "I let them treat me like that," you say, "Now I know how to protect my energy." INFJs don't need to become someone else. They just need to remember who they were before the pain, and who they've become because of it. That's not denial. That's healing. You're not the character someone else tried to reduce you to. You're the one telling the story now. And you get to decide what the next chapter looks like. Way number 6. embrace growth, healing, and rebirth. INFJs don't just survive emotional abuse, they transform through it. That doesn't make the pain okay. That doesn't make it fair. But for the INFJ, pain often becomes the starting point of something powerful. Not because they wanted it, but because they refuse to let it define them. After everything they have endured, INFJs reach a point where something shifts. They stop asking why it happened and start asking, what now? They begin to see the cracks, not as failure, but as space for something new to grow. Healing isn't instant, but it starts to feel real. This growth shows up in small ways first. The INFJ sets boundaries that once felt impossible. They say no without guilt. They walk away from patterns that once felt like home. And they begin building something new from the inside out, not a mask, not a performance, but a self that's honest and whole. This is the rebirth, the quiet becoming. It's not about revenge or proving anything to anyone. It's about reclaiming peace, trusting themselves again, loving their sensitivity, not apologizing for it, seeing their depth as strength, not weakness. INFJs have a natural ability to rise from pain with purpose. They reflect, rebirth and set rebirth, and often go on to help others do the same. But the most important part of that process is knowing they are worthy of healing, even if no one else says so. Even if no one ever apologizes. Growth is slow. Some days it feels like nothing is changing. But then, one day, you look around and realize you're no longer in the same place. You're no longer the same person. And what once broke you is now what helped you rise. Emotional abuse doesn't leave visible scars, but it changes the way you see yourself, the way you trust others, and the way you move through the world. For INFJs who already feel so deeply, that kind of damage can be overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be the end of the story. You've seen how INFJs cope, with recognition, boundaries, connection, reflection, reframing, and growth. These aren't quick fixes. They're part of a slow, honest return to the self. A self that's still whole, still valuable, still here. If you're an INFJ going through this, know that your healing doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Take your time. Trust your process. And above all, believe that you deserve peace, not because you've earned it, but because you've always been worthy of it. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not weak for feeling it all. You're simply a person who loved deeply and got hurt deeply. But that same depth will carry you home. Start small. A journal. A boundary. A quiet decision to put yourself first. These are not selfish acts. They are survival. And one day, they will become strength. You're not alone. And you're not stuck. You're just becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who finally knows they deserve to be free.